Hi everybody, it's Dr. Domingo, and this wrap-up video, which I plan to do regularly, hopefully once a week, is meant to just sum up what we've done this week and give a preview for next week. I also want to highlight some things that I've seen on the discussion boards and any assignments that may have been submitted. All right, so here we go. Here in our first module, we're introduced to this concept of the 5 exemplary practices of leadership. The 5 practices of exemplary leadership from Kouzes and Posner, authors of the book The Leadership Challenge. We also went into this book called The Handbook of Leadership Development from an organization called the Center for Creative Leadership. The Center for Creative Leadership has been around for several years and has many great resources that I encourage you to check out on their website, as does the Leadership Challenge from Kouzes and Posner. Now, with the CCL book, one of the things that I saw was that it could be a lot more theoretical than the Leadership Challenge book, and so take the content in there and blend those two together as you consider your discussions throughout the weeks. Now, one of my observations this first module was how you did great in your writing and your responses. And so many of you did a lot of application, of course, to your own context, but had a lot of good ideas that were supported from the literature and research. So continue to do that because I think that's great. The other thing, too, is I liked how several of you blended ideas together. That is, when you shared an idea, you followed through with it with support from the literature and then brought up another idea and then blended the two together, which was great. Some of you even answered the question, the response discussion question by blending the two concepts together, meaning that you blended ideas from the CCL book and the Leadership Challenge book. All that's great, so continue to do that throughout the weeks. Now, when we are talking about leadership versus leader development, personally, I think I use them synonymously, but our CCL book treats them different. The idea of leader development versus leadership development. And really, for me, what this means, I believe, is that leadership is the concept, the more theoretical, whereas we're talking specifically about people, and that's leader development. And so I often hear from people who talk about their organizations and they talk about, oh, hey, leadership told us to do this, or the decision was made by leadership. Well, leadership is amorphous. And so what we want to do is we want to talk about leaders. What did the leaders do? Who are our leaders? What makes them effective? And it brings me back to a story that I shared on some of the discussion threads about a breakfast that I had with a bunch of professors a few years ago with one of the authors of our book, Barry Posner. And the question was brought up at breakfast to Dr. Posner. Someone asked him, hey, so, are leaders born or are leaders made? And he thought about it, and his response was, you know what? All leaders are born. And to some extent, they are made by the environment and the experiences, of course. But really, that's the wrong question. The question we should be asking is, what makes for effective leaders? What makes leaders effective? Those are the questions we should be pursuing. And then in this class, we're talking about how do we develop other leaders so that they are effective? What are the skills, the capacities, the frameworks that we need to consider when we talk about helping bring people to their full potential as leaders in whatever context they find themselves in? Okay, all that said, the whole idea, I believe, that's inherent, that could be missed, is that idea is really about relationship and relational development. You will find throughout these threads that there's a couple of themes that I really hold on to within the space of leader development or leadership development. And that is that leadership is about relationship, first and foremost. And in order to be a good relational leader, one must know themselves. So a little later on in the class, we'll talk a little bit about introspection or insight as a needed skill in leader development. The other thing that I often refer to in leader development is this idea of culture and creating a leadership culture that's sustained over time for whatever organization, whether it's business, government, IT, or education, whatever it is, whatever space one finds themselves in, the idea of leader culture and the leader creating a culture so that the ideas about leadership and growing people and developing them is natural. It's intuitive for the organization. And I know some of you have shared examples of that. I shared some examples of that as well. All right. Our first leadership exemplary practice from the Leadership Challenge was a concept called Model the Way. And modeling the way, obviously, leaders can show what they do before they tell others what to do. That's the inherent concept in it. There's a couple principles within Model the Way that our book talks about, and I want you to think about those. How would you apply them in your own context? Because next week we will be looking at the second exemplary practice, and that is challenge the process. What we'll find is that throughout these 5 exemplary practices, you'll see that each and every one of them, in and of themselves, are great practices, and any one of them can be applied in your setting, and you can be an effective leader. Now, the strength comes when all of them are present, and there's tools how to measure that too, which I'll get into later on. But in any case, I just wanted to give a shout out to all of you for some great writing, some great analysis this week. You had some great responses to each other as well, which I love. I want you to think of these discussions as really a discussion. And so, yes, you want to write in APA, but at the same time, don't write so restrictively such that it's not a conversation, because your demonstration of your writing will be really in your papers. So think about that. And a little bit later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I expect in the papers and how I grade, etc. But for now, I just wanted to say great job on this week. You've done a great job discussing these ideas from the Leadership Challenge as well as the CCL book. There's lots of other resources and videos that we threw on there for you. Take a look at that. I hope this class is going to be applicable for you and that you've enjoyed it this first week. So other than that, continue to post as you need to throughout the end of this week, and I will see all of you online.